As we continue our study of assessment, I want to revisit the information fluency model that was introduced a couple of minutes ago. This time, I want to talk about it in terms of a learning cycle and what that looks like in the process of student learning. You'll remember that information fluency has three components: domain knowledge, critical thinking, presentation, and participation, and that all of those must be in play in order for a student to be fluent in an information space. As we've talked about assessment, we've looked at vocabulary from a couple of different systems. In the Fink text, he talks about auditive versus educative assessment. In the article by York that you've just read, York talks about summative versus formative assessment. What we're really looking at here is an expanded model of what formative assessment might be. So, if we break this down, and it's not always this sequential or particularly neat and tidy. Many times it moves about in different ways. But I think it is apparent that there is a cyclical nature evident. If we begin with the idea that domain knowledge is acquired from textbooks, maybe reading journals, students may be interviewing experts or talking to peers. Whatever the information source, we expect them to read, research, listen, observe, question. And then we get to the critical thinking stage. These terms are a really nice overlay of the facets of understanding that we talked about earlier in the term, or the categories of Bloom's taxonomy. We want them to think deeply, to think critically about the information that's been presented, or that they've explored and researched. After they've done that, we expect them to create some sort of original product that's a proof of their experience, or a compilation. When they do that, they're going to present it in a public space. Could be written, oral presentation, a visual, or a kinesthetic presentation. Think in terms of role play or an application. They may actually do something in the mode of the professional that they're pursuing. At that point, there needs to be feedback. At that point, it may cause the student to rethink, revise, or practice. So they're returning to the critical thinking portion. They may even be going back to the domain knowledge, where they may need to augment their knowledge with additional sources. Then they're going to revise and edit, and this process can cycle around several times before the final piece or the proof of learning is actually polished enough to contribute. Ideally, what we'd like to see at some point is the student may publish their work or post it or share it back to the world in some way that contributes to the world in some meaningful way that contributes to domain knowledge. I want to talk a little bit about the idea that there's inherently a private side of this process as we look at domain knowledge and think critically about it. And this is typically a personal or internal process. There's also a public space where these processes are naturally inherently public, where students receive feedback from their peers and the larger public. I want you to reflect a moment on the cohort experience from independent study or correspondence study. In the cohort model, we have an opportunity for students to receive feedback from multiple sources, from their peers, as well as from the teacher. With the advent of Web 2.0, we have an opportunity for students to present much more publicly. That opens the door for them to receive feedback from external sources, not just the external community of the classroom. It also raises the stakes. A student who knows their work is going to be published to the internet, to a place where it's going to have many more viewers, may actually spend more time and polish their work to a little higher level. They may care more about their final product. So in this unit, I want you to look at the curriculum and the lesson plan that you've been developing and think about the phases of formative assessment. Think about whether this cycle is being enacted in a meaningful and effective way in your course content, and think about how or whether you may need to enhance this aspect and work on polishing it.